What made you decide to sign up for this resume workshop? Is there something particular that anyone is looking to get out of this? If you have an answer to that, just unmute yourself, give us your first name if you would, and let us know what's important to you.
Hi, it's Lori.
I'm sorry, who is it?
Lori.
Lori, sure.
Yeah, my question is, I've had the last 2 years off due to the pandemic, and I have some health issues. So I'm unsure of what I would put on a resume for that.
If I heard you correctly, you're clear, but a little bit low in volume. You've been out of work for about the last 2 years, is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, due to the pandemic, and
Right.
I'm a high risk, I've got some health issues. So I'm wondering what I will put on my resume for that.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about some activities that some people might be able to participate in while being home or out of work at least. We'll see if we can cover some of that. Anyone else with an answer to that?
Yep, I'm just looking to see how resumes have been updated. I think the last resume I've done was probably about 18 years ago. So I will be paying close attention here.
Yeah, there are some specific changes in how resumes are formed these days than they were 15 or 20 years ago. That's certainly for sure.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Janice. I'm interested in more information about the different types of resumes. So like the traditional chronological one versus the skills-based one, format and how that goes. And
one of the points that I will make once we get going is I'm actually less concerned with the format than I am with the content. Are the things that are important about you that you want to share with an employer on your resume? We'll take a look at that and talk about the different styles. We are in our 1 minute countdown. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's 1:35, so we're going to begin. Thank you all for taking the time to join us this afternoon. My name is Marty Perlmutter. I'm a Career Center consultant, work out of the Portland Career Center, but many of us are still working remotely. And for about 1.5 years, I'd say at least, we've been offering virtual workshops. There's this resume workshop, there's an interview workshop, there's a workshop on using the main job link, as well as a workshop on LinkedIn. And you're welcome to participate in any of those. A couple of housekeeping things before we really get going. Some of you may be using this workshop, and by the way, I'm going to take myself off video as anyone else can do that if you choose. If you're using this workshop for a job search activity, if you're filing for unemployment, next week the question is, did you look for work or did you participate in one of the workshops? And you would check off that you participate in the workshop. And of course, this is the resume workshop. We encourage everyone to have a completed profile on the main job link. Employers can look at your resume on the main job link. There are currently over 20,000 job openings listed on the job link, but only a little over 2,000 resumes. So it's, I think, to your benefit if you are job searching to have a completed profile with a resume on the main job link. Now, we're scheduled to be here from now until 3 o'clock. This workshop takes up most of that time. We have a PowerPoint presentation. You received that yesterday, along with a link to a book called Job Hunting in Maine. And that Job Hunting in Maine book does have some examples of resumes that you'll be able to take a look at. We'll be referring to some different styles of resume in a while. But you have both of those links, and I know in the last couple of weeks, 1 or 2 participants did not or was not able to open the PowerPoint. Is there anyone on today who was not able to open the PowerPoint, to the best of your knowledge?
Hi, Marty, Kevin. Yeah,
Yes,
I
Kevin.
was not able to open that link.
Okay. At the end, I'm just going to make a note next to your name that I need to send you a copy separately of the PowerPoint.
Okay, very good.
And I'll do that afterwards. Anyone else have a problem with the PowerPoint? Not hearing any, we will move on. I have to make a correction to the title of this workshop, which is called Creating a Winning Resume. And I'm just going to mute everybody unless, again, if you have a question, don't hesitate to unmute. This workshop is actually titled Creating a Winning Resume, but we're not going to be creating anything this afternoon. On occasion, someone's been disappointed thinking that they're coming in and will leave at the end of the hour and a half with a resume. We just don't have the means to do that. This is more informational in nature. And we're going to take a look at some objectives in a moment. Then I'll tell you what some of my personal objectives are, and then we'll get going. So some of the official objectives of this afternoon are to understand the current resume trends and forecasts, determine which style of resume is best for you. But again, as I just mentioned earlier, I'm more concerned with the content of your resume than the style. And we'll talk more about that in a little while. Understanding formatting for a successful resume, creating a targeted resume for the job for which you're applying, how to write a good summary statement, something that's now called a branding statement. And one of the questions earlier was what's new in resume development over the last 15 or so years. And one of the newest things is the idea of this thing called a branding statement, which we're going to take a look at right off the bat. Writing cover letters. In the Job Hunting in Maine book, not only will you see samples of resumes, but you will see a sample of a good basic cover letter. We'll mention something called ONET to help with resume language, and you'll see the link for ONET as well. And then if you'd like to have a resume critiqued, we'll give you the protocol to have that done and how to hook up with some of us at the Career Center with any questions or information that you need further on about your resume. So those are the official objectives. If I hope you get anything out of this afternoon's workshop, it's the following. Number one, the importance of developing this thing called a branding statement or a summary statement or a professional profile. Something that goes right at the top of your resume. We'll take a look at one in just a moment. The second goal that I have is to understand the importance of evaluating and understanding your skills, or what are known as your KSAs, to be able to communicate your KSAs to a potential employer, and then finally to be able to prove that what you're saying is true. And finally, the third thing that I would like to focus on as far as what's important on a resume is to get the sense of your accomplishments, achievements, and successes across to an employer. because there's a feeling out there, and I think it's a correct feeling, that past success is a good indicator of future success. So we'll talk about how to do that as well. Now, since this is a workshop on resumes, I think there is one logical question I'd like to throw out, and that is this. How would you define what a resume is? What's your definition of a resume? And if you have an answer, just kindly unmute yourself. And again, if you don't mind giving your first name and how you would define a resume. Any ideas? Going once, going twice.
Hi, Janice. I would just say
Yes,
that
Janice.
it's a statement and listing of your work history and skills.
Great. Absolutely true. Those are two things that go on to a resume, your work history and your skills. Someone else might say your educational background and the training that you've had. But I'm going to ask you to consider resumes. Those are certainly things that go onto a resume. But I'm going to ask you to consider a slightly different definition of a resume. That a resume is an advertisement for a product. That product just happens to be you, the job seeker. And if you think about advertisements you've seen on TV or whatever medium you might use, think about what they tell you about that product or service. Two things. One, they tell you the features of the product. But perhaps more importantly, they try to get across the benefits of that product to you, the consumer. Now, although in reality, both the job seeker and the employer are both the product and the consumer trying to sell each other. For what we're doing today, the product is the job seeker, the consumer is the employer. And the question is, what are the benefits that you can bring to that potential employer? And if you can get that across, that's going to increase your chances of going on to the next step. Because resumes don't really end up with job offers, but they end up with interviews. So if you're getting your share of interviews, you're probably getting your point across pretty well. But let's think about resumes as an advertisement for a product. Now, just a very short history of a resume probably dates back from what we could tell to the 1500s, and Leonardo da Vinci was trying to get his benefactors to support his artwork, put together information about what he's done in the past. And up until about the 20th century, really there wasn't that much of a history about resumes. And of course, during the 20th century, the way people initially applied for jobs were not only with a job application, but obviously with a resume as well. Now, keep in mind there's a key difference between a resume and a job application, and it has to do with who develops each product. You're answering their questions on a job application, but you're putting what you want on your resume. So your resume really should be focused on things that will help you to go on to the next step, being the interview. A resume, in other words, is not an autobiography. And you could be leaving things out of your resume if they're not beneficial to your chances of moving forward. Now, some new things in resume development. First of all, resume, one of the difficult things to realize is that resume writing is an art form, it's not a science. And what that means is that there are no formulas. It's very difficult to say Well, you're absolutely going to get interviews with this resume. We could say that based on feedback from employers, what you've got on your resume is generally what employers look for. But there's no way to absolutely tell that a resume is going to work until you use it. And if you're getting your share of interviews for jobs that you believe you're qualified to do and jobs that are open, then your resume is working. And if you're not getting interviews, then it's time to take a look, see how it could be upgraded. Now, some of you may be starting a resume from scratch. Some of you may have been using a resume and looking to update it or upgrade it. And some of you may not have worked on a resume, as someone said, for 15 or 20 years. So what are some new things in resume development? And the three things we're going to take a look at is selling yourself and your brand. Identify not only your transferable skills, but other skills about you, and we'll define what those skills are. And then highlighting your accomplishments as well. A resume these days is not just a list of duties and responsibilities. Perhaps one of the most overused terms on a resume is responsible for. We're going to try to take a look at presenting your background and your skills in a way that says to the potential employer, I really have something to offer that you need. Now again, as we go through this, there'll be various times when I say what questions do you have about what's being presented, but you can either put anything in the chat box at the top or wherever it is on your computer, or just unmute yourself and ask any questions or make any comments that you might have. You don't need to wait for me to say what questions do you have. So one of the newest things in resume development is elimination of what for years was an objective on a resume. Objectives are just things that aren't seen nearly as much these days as the development of what's now known as a branding statement. And that branding statement is an opportunity to really focus on your skills and qualifications for the job. And one thing to keep in mind is that as you review a job posting, a job description, which I read today, job seekers spend on average about 76 seconds reading a job posting. And the more you understand what someone is looking for, what a company is looking for from that posting, the better you'll be able to develop statements like what we're going to look at and hear in a moment. So under your contact information, which is the first thing that goes on a resume, might go something like this. And I'm going to ask, after I read this, if someone would tell us what you think is the type of job this individual is applying for. So this is the statement under their contact information. 8 successful years providing quality services and support to youth and adults in the social services and education fields. Outstanding leadership, problem solving, and organizational abilities with extensive experience in employment counseling, case management, supervision, and training. Dedicated to improving the quality of life for all individuals and ensuring the proper resources and services are provided at all levels and stages in their development. Now again, there's nothing on this person's resume that will say objective. But from reading and hearing this statement, what type of work, what job do you think this individual is applying for? And again, if you have an answer, simply unmute yourself.
Maybe something in the social work field, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely could be a social worker. Thank you, Nancy. Could be the type of work that I do at the Career Center, helping people with their job search activities. I like two things about this statement. The first 3 lines talks about this individual's background and skills. And I'm going to guess that these words came directly from the job posting. That posting may have asked for someone with leadership, problem-solving, organizational abilities, etc., with experience in employment counseling. The last 2 lines really talks more about their philosophy of helping people. Now, the reason why it's important to use words directly from the job posting is that one of the newer concepts in resume development over the last 5 to 10 years is the use of what's known as an applicant tracking system. When you upload your resume, there's a good chance that the first set of eyes that's going to read your resume are the eyes of a computer. And that computer is set up to pick up on keywords and phrases. If you parrot as many keywords from the job description and put them on your resume, it's going to be more of a match. And you're going to stand a better chance of going forward in the process. So the question that's often asked is, can I use the same resume for every job? And my answer is perhaps some of your resume, but things like a summary of qualifications or a branding statement really has to be focused on that specific job, using that job posting as your guide. In other words, the job posting is your friend. And it gives that employer an initial quick glance at what your skills are and what your background is. And then you further down could back that up with education and training and your work history. So this again is called a branding statement. And I would hope that as a result of being here this afternoon, if you haven't already done so, that you develop a statement about yourself that you're comfortable with, that really comes across showing that you're a competent and qualified individual. What questions do you have about the idea of a branding statement?
Marty, it's Tanis. I have a question.
Yes.
I'm wondering about this branding statement format and how you do that when your resume is online, for instance. So like if you, I don't know, if you're looking at jobs from the Northern Light Health, right? And
Yes.
I've gone through the Northern Light Health thing and made, answered all of their questions that they want in terms of their resume, so to speak, in quotes. And then I posted, uploaded, my very simple chronological one. But where would you put this statement on that situation?
Well, if you're uploading your own resume, which you're saying is a chronological listing of your experience, above your experience can have a statement like this, where you focus on what they're looking for if you have that in your background. Because the second set of eyes after the computer is going to be probably a HR person, someone looking for some general background. And then the third set of eyes could be a department manager looking for specific skills. So the more you can address the things that they're looking for in the posting, I think the better your chances are going to be. Now,
I understand what you're saying, but on the Northern Light website, you just upload the resume and it's there. So it's not specific to any one job.
So you're uploading a generic resume? Is that what
Pretty
you're saying?
Generic, yes, pretty generic, because each job is different, right? So they already have a generic one that they're looking at for everything. But if I wanted to apply to a pediatric nurse job, and so I wanted to tailor it to being a pediatric nurse, the branding statement. They've already got the resume. I don't know if you can upload another resume.
I don't know what their system is like, so I can't answer that question. But I think that each job by themselves calls for at least part of a different resume, where you really focus a statement like this on that specific job. If you could do that, I would do it. If you can't do it, then that's obviously something else. But at some point, a department manager or a head nurse or whatever the title might be is going to take a look at that information and look for specific background and skills that you either show or perhaps don't show if it's more generic. Don't know how else to answer that question based on their format.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of true with the main job link too. But at least at the main job link, you can have many different resumes.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely.
But you can't have that on something like the Northern Lighthouse. So anyway,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Okay. And Patrick, your answer, you don't need a header for this. It could be a statement right under your contact information. You don't need to call it a branding statement or a professional profile or anything. The statement by itself would be sufficient. You know, Tanis, your question reminds me something I didn't mention. An answer to a lot of questions, unfortunately, in resume development is it depends. It depends on a variety of things, such as the format that you're sending this to, your background. There are so many factors that go into it that there's no one absolute answer. And sometimes, although you hear, gee, it's advantageous to have a separate resume for every job, it may not be something that you can do based on the format from the company or organization you're looking for, but I would certainly make an attempt to do so if possible. Now, when I've worked with a variety of people in the past who've been laid off from a job, let's say, one of the first things on someone's mind is generally, gee, I need to get a resume and I need to get it out there as quickly as possible. And my recommendation is to take a step back and see if you could do a little self-evaluation, particularly with regard to what are known as your KSAs, your knowledge, skills, and abilities. What you've learned, what you're good at, what you've got the potential to do well. And it's a term that you see on a number of different job descriptions, necessary or preferred KSAs. And there are basically three different types of skills that I would ask you to determine about yourself. The first one is the skill you see in the middle that I'd like to talk about, called job-related or technical skills for the job. The skills to be a pediatric nurse are much different than the skills to be, let's say, an administrative assistant or a classroom teacher. Classroom teacher has to know how to put together a curriculum and make effective presentations to students. An administrative assistant has to have keyboarding skills and office software. A pediatric nurse certainly needs specific skills in the nursing field that may be different from what I gather than geriatric nursing, for example. So whatever your technical skills are for a job, I think it's really important to get a handle on what those are. The second type of skill is the skill you see at the top called adaptive. And Nancy, did you have a question or a comment? Apparently not. The second type of skill is what's, you see at the top, adaptive skills, or what I call personality skills. What are the positive personality traits that are going to help you be successful in a position? Now, when we ask people, what are some of your qualities? We often hear very similar things. Oftentimes, job seekers will say, well, I'm reliable, I get to work every day and on time. Or I'm dependable, I get to work every day and on time. I'm reliable, you can rely on me to get a job done. I'm honest and trustworthy. Those are all great qualities. But one of the things about job searching is the ability to come across in somewhat of a different or unique manner. If you can tell an employer something about yourself that's different, relevant to the position, but different than what other people are saying about themselves, you may stand out more than fellow job seekers will stand out. Because again, the tendency is for people to repeat very common things about themselves. Here's the part of the afternoon I'm going to ask to do one group activity. The group activity has to do with using your first name as a guide. If you have something to write with or on, you write your first name down the left-hand side of the page. And for each letter of your first name, can you come up with a quality or a positive adjective to describe yourself? To give you an example, my name is Marty, M-A-R-T-Y. I would say I'm self-motivated. I'm always willing to help. So the word always helps me define myself. Always willing to help out. I'm resourceful. Here's a word that would be good if I was going into outside sales. I'm tenacious, but not so good if I was going to work in a daycare center. And I have a very young attitude about the things I do in the world of work. I don't sit back and do things the way they've always been done. I look for new ways to do things. So I'm going to ask you to take 1 minute, see what you could come up with to describe yourself using each letter of your name. After 1 minute, I'm going to ask for 1 or 2 people to give examples. And don't worry if you can't think of anything for every letter of your name. So 1 minute. About 30 seconds. And the 10-second countdown. Okay, 2 reasons I'm asking you to do this. One is to, again, think of yourself maybe a little differently than you have in the past and the way other people would describe themselves. And secondly, if you're asked to talk about some of your qualities, if you can remember your name, you will always remember these qualities. You won't forget them. So that being said, is there anyone willing to volunteer? Tell us your first name and what you came up with for words using the letters in your name.
I can do it.
Is it Tanis?
It is.
Great, thank you, Tanis. Go right ahead.
I put tenacious, also your T. So I put a couple of things. I put affable, but I thought that might be a quality more than a skill kind of thing. So then I put available, so I'm like willing to make myself available. I put negotiate, so I'm good at negotiating. Inspirational and sensitive.
Great list. Thank you, Tanis. All true of you, obviously.
Huh?
All true of you.
Some other ones. I also thought about, I don't know what. Aggressive was another possibility, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, some words are better for some types of jobs than others, probably.
Right.
Did your name, just out of curiosity, sort of force you to think of something you would not ordinarily have thought of?
Yes, I think that's true. Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks for doing that, Tanis. I'm going to ask for one more person, if there is, one more volunteer, your name and what you came up with.
Oh, it's Nancy. I didn't get all my letters, but I
That's okay.
have a few copied right from right this one before me, and Nancy's.
Whoops, we lose your.
Oops, I'm sorry.
There you go.
So I started with the N. I started with neat. The A I didn't come up with yet, but the second N, a negotiator, very good skills with that. The C, competent, and then the Y, I was still thinking about that. I didn't finish that one either.
Fair enough, no problem. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Tanis. Again, just the idea of helping you think about yourself maybe slightly differently than you have in the past. So the second type of skill are the personality skills. And the third type of skills, whereas job-related skills are the technical parts of the job, adaptive skills are your personality traits, transferable skills are more universal in nature. These have to do with skills that are true for virtually any job. When we ask employers what are some of the things you look for as far as transferable, another word that's used is portable skills. What we hear are things like people who work well in a team situation, people who show leadership qualities, excellent communication skills. Now, to clarify that, we think of communication often as verbal skills, but also writing skills are important. And something we don't often think about, listening skills. Are you a good listener? Time management skills. And then, of course, computer skills are true on virtually any job these days. So again, these are skills that are universal, true on virtually any job. When we talk about knowledge, skills, and abilities, about those three areas of skills, to understand them about yourself, communicate them, could be on a resume, could be in a cover letter, certainly could be in an interview. But if you're going to say something about yourself in a resume, there's a good chance you'll be asked to prove them in an interview. Now, if you have called yourself an outgoing individual or enthusiastic, you can demonstrate that in an interview just by the way you come across. But if I talk about myself as being an excellent problem solver, that's more difficult to show. You really need an example more than anything. So there is a process called the PAR method. Problem, action, result. What was the problem you faced? What was the action you took? What was the result? It can also be called the SAR method. What was the situation you faced? What was the action you took? And what was the result? Marty, on your resume, you said you have excellent customer service skills. Can you give me an example of that? I would hope to be able in an interview to say, here's the situation I faced, here's what I did to resolve it, and here was the result. What questions does anyone have with regard to the concept of KSAs? Really important to get a good handle on that in each of those categories. So the next important concept is focusing on your accomplishments, achievements, and successes. Now, I know that's splitting hairs among those three. You might ask yourself, what are you most proud of having done, not only on jobs that you've held, but in life experiences also? You know, research is done on all different types of things, and there's a study showing that if you can quantify your achievements on your resume, you can have up to a 40% boost over your competition. When you think about jobs that you've held, there is a tendency to want to say things like responsible for and talk about day-to-day duties and responsibilities. But I would ask you, if possible, to hone your major responsibilities into just one or two sentences, if possible. And then focus on what you've actually achieved in those positions. Some examples of accomplishment and achievement statements might be: led a team of 15 personnel in a call center for more than 5 years. Received maximum evaluations on annual performance appraisals by department managers. Saved 45% on call center costs by introducing motivational training for staff members. Developed and implemented a department budget of up to $500,000. It is more effective to talk about the dollar amounts, percentages, numbers, than to simply say developed and implemented department budgets or saved costs by doing this and that. Give percentages, dollar amounts. If you were in sales, did you increase sales on a year-to-year basis? Show that you're competent. Maybe you had a job making pizzas and sandwiches at a local corner store, but you had repeat customers who were always happy and smiling and praised the food that you made. That's an accomplishment. It doesn't have to be the fact that you developed a cure for an illness. If you can't think of your accomplishments, there are two places you might be able to find them. One is on any reference letters that you've received. Secondly, if you still have access to yearly evaluations, it's more likely that supervisors specifically stated things that you accomplished during the last time frame. I would even go so far as to consider putting a quote from a previous supervisor right on your resume. You might have some statements of accomplishments, and under that, what someone actually said about you, word for word, from an evaluation or a reference letter. That's something you might not think of ordinarily, but it could be very effective on a resume. What questions do you have about the concept of focusing on accomplishments on a resume? So once again, hearing and seeing none, we'll move on. Talk about the importance of using keywords on your resume direct from the job description. Incorporating that skills section or summary of qualification or branding statement. Trying to keep the format simple. Now, for the most part, resumes are written in bullet statements rather than long paragraphs. There's more of a chance that an HR person or a department manager will visually scan your resume looking for important information about you rather than reading paragraphs word for word. There are various studies out there that say that people who review resumes take 15 or 20 seconds on each resume, and some say even less than that. So if you bury important information about yourself at the bottom, or if your resume goes to a second page, there's a good chance that no one will ever pick up on that. That's why that branding statement or that summary of qualification could be really important, because it really gives you an opportunity to show what you've done and what you're capable of doing and what's important to you. We believe strongly that resumes should be targeted to the industry to which you're applying. Include just relevant information about yourself, keeping in mind that a resume is not an autobiography, and customize to the position based on the job posting. Now, again, I understand in the example we heard earlier that you may be applying to a place where they ask you for a resume and then that's it. If you apply to a second or third job there, they're not asking for another resume. So again, it really depends on the parameters that are set for you when you apply for a job. In the Job Hunting in Maine book, which you have a copy, a link to, you'll see 3 examples of resumes. The first being a chronological resume, which by far is the most used or accepted form of resume over the years. And I'm just letting Tanis back in.
Sorry,
Back in, Tanis?
I am. I don't know what happened. Sorry.
Okay, not a problem. That does happen sometimes. Quirks of teams, maybe. So, by and large, over the years, chronological resumes have been the most widely used. That basically means when you document your work history, you start from your most recent experience and go backwards. It's an accepted time frame to use about 10 to 15 years of experience with, again, some exceptions. If you have relevant experience going further back, I would certainly consider including that on your resume. But you don't have to put every job you've done. Most interesting example I can give is someone that I worked with who had extensive experience using key punch machines back in the, I don't know if it was the 80s or 90s. And my question to that individual who wanted to focus on that time frame was this: is that relevant to the office workplace today? Or are your computer skills more relevant than using a key punch machine where you feed in these cards and comes out with key punch holes? So ask yourself, is this information relevant to know about me? Now we're going to talk in a little while about formatting a resume when perhaps you've had basically the same job, but you've done it in 3 or 4 different places. Back in the 90s or so, functional resumes became the way of the world. These were resumes that focused more on functions of jobs than the jobs themselves. But the feedback from employers is that it was sort of confusing to try to figure out where the individual really used these skills. And the combination resume really focuses on skills and accomplishments, again, using that branding statement as almost the centerpiece of your resume. The most important real estate on your resume is the top half of the first page. It is okay to go on to a second page, but if you can condense information into one page, so much the better. In the Job Hunting in Maine book on pages 41 to 43, you'll see 3 different styles of resumes. I might also suggest doing a search online for resumes from people who do the type of work you're looking to do. Maybe it's a bookkeeper. Maybe it's a real estate estimator. It could be anything. Do a search for resumes, people doing work in the field that you're looking for, and see what sort of examples you can find. Now, there have been people, as we just heard earlier, who've been out of work because of COVID-related issues over the last 2 years. It could be that, not that you developed COVID, but your job was eliminated and you were downsized and you've been out of work for 2 years. One of the concerns that employers might have is if you haven't been working for a period of time, how have you kept your skills up to date? Maybe you volunteered. Maybe you took advantage of Coursera when they partnered with the Maine Department of Labor to offer courses. Let me give you 2 sites that you have, if you have any interest in particularly in technology, to keep your skills up to date. These are free, work at your own pace, self-paced sites. The first one is called GCF, learnfree.org. GCF Learn Free. George, Charlie, Francine. Learnfree.org. You pick the subject matter you're interested in learning. You could start, if it was Microsoft products, for example, if it was Excel, it takes you right through from beginners through more of an advanced level. The Maine State Library, which is a state website, has something called Learning Express. And the Learning Express gives you an opportunity, again, to learn many skills or update your skills at no charge to you. If on your resume you have a section that says education and training, education to me is high school, college, and beyond. Training is specific training which you took advantage of to upgrade your skills. If you did it through GCF Learn Free or Learning Express, I would put that on your resume and what courses you put yourself through. Again, they're self-paced learning experiences. So check those out. Let's talk about resume contents. Again, you'll see examples in the Job Hunting in Maine book. We're not taking a look at those because we found we sort of get bogged down with those examples, but please do take a look at them on your own. Contact information, your name, your address, phone number, be it home, cell, both if you still have a home phone, and email address. So a couple of things about contact information. It is a fairly common practice these days that people don't put their whole address on a resume. In other words, if you don't want someone to know exactly where you live, that's okay. But the city and town and state is sufficient. If the job is in Portland, you live in Bangor, obviously the employer is going to want to know that. If it's remote, that makes it easier. If it's someplace you've got to get to, that 125 miles or so is a long way to travel every day. Right under that would be that statement, if you're able to develop one about yourself. And then your work history, professional experience, or your education and training. And which category would go next depends on which is more important in your background. If you have recent educational experience and learned your skills through schooling, maybe that would go next. If your experience is more important to your ability to get a new job, that would go next. Now, again, there are a number of ways to lay this out. If you had a variety of different types of jobs, I would consider a category that said relevant experience. And I would go into some detail about the jobs that you have that are relevant to what you want to do now. And then under that, I would have a category that said other experience, where I would simply list those jobs without going into any detail, unless there are skills that you've learned and have as a result of those jobs. If you had the same job title and you did that job in 2 or 3 different places, the way I would put that on my resume would be the following. I would have the job title, administrative assistant, and the number of years or the calendar years or the dates that I did that work. Under that, I would have the names of the 3 or 4 places I did that work in and the years where I worked in those places. And then I would have one job description, because that particular type of work and many job titles are very similar. Yes, there are quirks from place to place, but the overall job of an administrative assistant or an elementary school teacher or a pediatric nurse are probably very similar. So I would have one job description. And then under that, I would have a category that said something like examples of accomplishments, achievements, and successes. And I would list what I think were my major accomplishments. That administrative assistant, although we know what the job title does on a day-to-day basis, maybe what we don't know is that that person helped to rewrite part of an employee manual to make it more reader and user friendly, that they redesigned the visitors area of the business for better traffic flow. Think about what you've accomplished, what you're proud of having done. If you communicate in a language other than English, I would have that on your resume. And that includes sign language, by the way, if any of you are signers. Hobbies and interests. I would leave that off your resume with one major exception. If you're applying for a job in one of the outdoor retailers in the state of Maine, where your hobbies of hiking and camping and fishing and mountain climbing are part of the core business, then I would put those hobbies and interests in. But if you're applying for a job in a law firm, unless your hobby is reading law books at night, I would leave your hobbies out. And I would have a listing of your computer skills no matter what the job is. And sometimes people squirm over really adequately portraying their level of skill. There are 3 words or phrases I might recommend. Familiar with computers and a variety of office software, including. To me, familiar with, I've seen it. I don't have a high level, but I've seen it used. Working knowledge of computers and a variety of business software, including. Working knowledge says to me I've used it in a work situation. And then finally, competent in the use of computers and a variety of software, including. And to me, competent means I have a higher level and can even help others if necessary. Don't oversell your skills on a resume, but certainly don't undersell them. Certainly work with people who said, I have a master's degree, but I find if I put that on my resume, people think I'm overqualified. Then my suggestion is leave it out. Again, you're designing your resume. Don't put things on your resume that aren't true, but leave things out if you think they're hindering your chances of moving forward. And then in an interview, you can always bring up the fact that you do indeed have an advanced degree. So again, education, high school, college, and beyond, training, specific classes and courses you've taken. If you're a veteran, you want to put in your military experience, certainly you could do that. You don't need to put every class and training that you've had, however. Volunteer experience could go under work experience. What questions do you have about contents of a resume? It's suggested that the simple statement references are available upon request is not necessary. It's assumed that you'll have references when asked for. Basically, what you're doing is you're making a statement about yourself and then backing it up with your experience, your education, and your training further down in your resume. If your resume goes onto a second page, your name and page 2 or PG2 should go at the top. An 11 or 12 font size of a resume is sufficient. Nothing too fancy as to the type. Again, you'll see some good tips in the Job Hunting in Maine book as well. There's a nice section on resumes. So a word about email addresses. It's been shown through research that unprofessional resume addresses are a problem and could eliminate someone from consideration. Some examples of that might be Kenny waiting to retire at gmail.com. Mommy of 3 boys at Gmail. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a mommy of 3 boys, obviously, but maybe for a resume, you would want something with your name at gmail.com, something like that. And then J. Smith, 1954. That's probably this individual's year of birth, and it shows their age. I have a 45 in my personal email, and although some people might think, boy, I wonder if he was born in 1945, or is that his age? I used to be a record collector, and when I came up with this email address, 45 stood for 45 RPM records. So I put that at the end of my address. Word about social media. You can be pretty well assured that a potential employer will look you up on social media. Just to name 2 of many: Facebook, the social side of social media, friends and family; LinkedIn, the professional side of social media. And we recommend taking a look at LinkedIn if you haven't done so already. There is a workshop you could sign up for on developing a LinkedIn profile. But the nice thing about social media is you could look up the employer as well. And if you wind up with an interview and you know the person's name is going to be interviewing you, look them up. Do a Google search for them. Find out something about their background, because they've certainly done that for you. Again, we talked about quantifying as much as possible. Spelling out abbreviations. Now, I would put one little caveat to that. If you're looking at a job description and you're applying for a job, let's say as a CPA, a certified public accountant, if the job description uses the words certified public accountant, I would use those words on your resume. If, on the other hand, they use the words or the letters CPA, I would use those on your resume. Why? Because you're trying to match the words from the job posting to the words in your resume. So whenever there are abbreviations for work that you've done or a title or something, take a look to see how it's listed on the job posting. On the other hand, if I would use if there wasn't anything on the job posting, I would spell out certified public accountant and in parentheses put CPA, and then the next time I used it on my resume, I would just say CPA. But again, parrot the job description when possible. Check, recheck again for spelling and grammar. That's not as important to every employer as it is to some. Obviously, if you were applying for a job in the media, spelling and grammar would be really important. And we hear from employers all the time that job seekers often don't follow the instructions in the job posting. If the posting asks for to include a cover letter, certainly you need to do that. We recommend including a cover letter for any job. We're going to talk about cover letters in a moment. But in the most basic form, a cover letter is an introduction to your resume. It tells the employer why they're receiving your resume. If the job posting asks for the names of 3 references to be included, you'll need those. And in the rare exception where the job posting asks you to include 3 letters of reference, you'll need those. And even if it doesn't ask that, you'll be asked for those probably in an interview. So if your letters of reference are not current, I would make an attempt to get an updated, a current date on those letters rather than something from 2 or 3 years ago. Generally speaking, resumes are 1 to 2 pages. There are some exceptions for higher level education, some medical field and law fields, but generally speaking, 1 to 2 pages is sufficient. But the real answer is it depends. It should be as long as you need to have it to convey your career story. Again, take a look at examples in the Job Hunting in Maine book, and you'll see 3 really different formats for a resume. There are resume builders online. The main job link is certainly one of them where you could develop your resume right on the job link with the title of the type of work that you want to do. Some people make the mistake of titling their resume with their name, and on the job link, employers won't be looking you up, but they'll be looking up the job title. But a lot of resume builders, templates, so to speak, cost money. Every time I go onto YouTube, it seems I get this ad for one particular resume builder, and part of the ad for it says free to start. And to me that implies it's not free to finish. It's going to cost me money. So there's no reason really to spend money on these resume builders. You can do so with the main job link. And if you have Word experience, a nice way to do a resume certainly is on Word. Take a look for some tips on formatting in the main, Job Hunting in Maine book. Before we talk about cover letters, what questions do you have about anything that was presented with regard to resumes or anything that was not? Keeping in mind that sometimes there aren't absolute answers to some situations.
Marty, you keep referencing the Job Hunting in Maine book. What is that?
So that's a link that you should have that was sent to you yesterday. If for some reason you don't have it, on maincareercenter.gov, you've probably all been on that site,
Yep.
maincareercenter.gov. If you click on the library tab
Okay.
and scroll down, you'll see two books. You'll see Job Hunting in Maine, and you'll see a book called Transitions, which refers to many community and state resources that are out there. But the Job Hunting in Maine was part of the invitation you received yesterday. And again, if you don't have it, maincareercenter.gov, click on the library tab, scroll down, and you'll see Job Hunting in Maine.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. What other questions does anyone have before we just talk about cover letters? So again, hearing or seeing none, cover letters are basically an introduction to why someone's receiving your resume. Again, you'll see an example of a cover letter in the Job Hunting in Maine book, but what you see will go something like this. One of the things that causes a lot of angst for some job seekers is how do you address the letter? Years ago, you might see Dear Sir or Madam. I think that's pretty out of date, pretty antiquated these days. I haven't been called Madam in at least 10 or 15 years. To whom it may concern, pretty impersonal. But if you wanted to address your letter, you might just say, Dear Hiring Manager. And it might go something like this, and you'll see something similar in the Job Hunting in Maine book. Please accept my enclosed resume as application for the position of whatever it is, which I've reviewed on the main job link or Jobs in ME or Indeed.com. Now, it doesn't cost employers anything to post their jobs on the main job link, but it does cost money to post on the other sites, so they like to know where you reviewed the position. Or maybe you were referred to it by someone who works there. You can mention that. Second paragraph specifically state what you believe qualifies you for the position. Now, you could refer back to your resume. As you see on my resume, I've got experience in, knowledge of, skills in, the ability to, the educational background you're looking for. One thing we haven't mentioned, licenses and certifications you could certainly not only have on your resume, but mention. The only thing about a cover letter is don't leave important things out of your resume, because the feedback from some employers is that we don't have the time to read cover letters. We only use resumes for screening. So if you're leaving important things about you out of your resume and putting them in your cover letter, you may be missing the boat on that one. The other thing that qualifies some people for jobs, and we haven't mentioned it, and the cover letter is a really good place to mention this, is your desire and motivation to do that type of work. So if it's in your heart and your gut, you love doing that, let the potential employer know that. Third paragraph, if it exists, is this. If there's a reason you really want to work for that company or organization, so in other words, it's not just the job, but it could go something like this. I've been a customer of yours for many years. I've always been impressed by the quality of the products or the service which you've produced. I would be proud to be part of an organization that takes such pride in its work. So if there's a specific reason why you want to work in that place, let them know. If there's not, you leave that out. And then the last paragraph, follow-up. I look forward to the opportunity to meet with you either in person or virtually. to present my qualifications and further discuss the requirements and objectives of the position. You can reach me during the day at this phone number, or in the evening at this phone number, or anytime by email. Sincerely, respectfully, and your name, and there's your basic cover letter. And you'll see something similar to that in the Job Hunting in Maine book if you have a little, if you're stymied at all by how to put together a cover letter. What questions do you have about the concept of cover letters? It's a business letter, one page. Again, if you want to add something to your resume in your cover letter, great, but don't leave out important information. And again, 3 or 4 paragraphs. What questions does anyone have with regard to that? Joblink.maine.gov is the website for the Maine Job Link. If you're receiving unemployment, it is a requirement to have a completed profile, including your resume, on the Job Link. I would highly suggest checking out onetonline.org as well as careeronestop.org. ONET can give you information about knowledge, skills, and abilities for a wide range of jobs. There's information about presenting yourself as a more mature worker or older worker, whatever term you'd like to use. Career One Stop, I believe, has that information, but there's a wealth of information on both of those websites. And again, you've got that in the PowerPoint that was sent to you, and Kevin, you'll be receiving that from me after this. If you'd like your resume to be reviewed, the protocol is to send it to the Career Center Consultant of the Day at maine.dol.careercenter@maine.gov. There is a hotline number that can get you through to unemployment or the Career Center or vocational rehabilitation if you need the services provided from them. That number, 623-7981, is available from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. There's a Career Center live chat that goes from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday at mainecareercenter.gov. When you go onto that, you'll see a floating chat box, and you can be connected online to the people who are involved in the live chat. You also have my email that I sent you the links yesterday. You'll get tomorrow, in all likelihood. I don't think it'll go out this evening or this afternoon. I've lost the words. A verification that you attended today's workshop. If there's ever a question, you'll have that. As confirmation is the word I was looking for, as well as a survey link that you could fill out and send in. And you'll be receiving that later. And if you have any further questions or comments, you can always contact me. You'll have my email and phone number and what I send to you as well. We mentioned Job Hunting in Maine. If you attend the interviewing workshop, they use something I believe called the CRISP style of interviewing. Each of those letters stands for something which I can't recall. Career One Stop and ONET, 2 really good websites to check out. And there are a couple of sites about trends. If you did a Google search, 25 current trends, 10 current trends for resumes, you'll see a list of trends And very much you'll see things we've talked about. The importance of a branding statement, the importance of quantifying your accomplishments, the importance of understanding your skills, and some of the things that keep people from going forward in the process, misspellings and grammar mistakes, and resumes that aren't focused on the position itself, things along those lines. But all sorts of information, websites, podcasts, YouTube videos, really a wealth of information. Before we end up, does anyone have any questions or comments you would like to make? I'm going to call the roll to make sure I have everyone's name, and then we will be done for the afternoon. Nancy, I see you're unmuted as well as Randy.
Yep.
Yes.
Nancy, anything you'd like to ask or say?
No, I actually took some pictures of the PowerPoint, certain slides that I want to remember, more than others that had some pretty good information in them. So I'll be working with those too.
Do you need a copy of the PowerPoint, Nancy?
Well, you say, I watched it as you were going through it, so I obviously, got it, but I sometimes like to take a picture of it so I can focus on that one page.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Thank you.
And who else is unmuted? Tanis, are you unmuted? I see
I'm
Timothy as well.
Yes, no, it worked good, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And Timothy, I've got you down obviously as being here, so you're all set to go, as well as you're all set, Nancy.
I am.
Tanis, anything you want to mention before we let you go as well?
Just thank you. I've got a lot of notes, and it was really very helpful, actually. Please. Thank you.
Great, Tanis. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
Yes, I totally agree with her. It's very helpful, and thank you for the information.
You're welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Take care.
Patrick, you're all set to go. Kevin, I'll get you the PowerPoint.
Very good. Thank you,
Michael,
Marty.
you were actually the first person on. You're all set.
Yeah, I'm still here. You said Michael, correct?
Yes, Michael.
Okay,
yeah.
yes. Sorry, everything is really good. I really appreciate all your time and help, and I've taken a lot of notes, so thank you.
Great, you're very welcome. And again, if you want to follow up, you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. You will get that confirmation probably first thing tomorrow morning, along with these surveys. So thank you all. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Thanks. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
You too.
Thank you, same to you too. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.